Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvasesha Sunyadi Pastyatyare Shatarine Namaste De Gauravani Pracharine Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Astachare Satarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Vedanta Shivasari Gauravakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Vedanta Shivasari Gauravakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Shri Prabhupada ki Jai, Shri Gaur Nitai ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada ki Jai, Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki Jai. Oh, Premanandi, oh, glorious to the assembled devotees, oh, close to Shri Guru and Rango, close to Shri Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Jai. Hare Krishna. So we'll hand over to our host. Who's the host? Krishnanand? Are you the
I'm
host?
your servant, Maharaj. Servant of devotees. Madhupadu Prabhu is our host.
Oh, Madhupati Prabhu, but you seem to be doing the talking.
Sorry, forgive me for that, Maharaj. Madhupadu Prabhu, you want me to introduce, or you want to introduce? I think you might be busy.
Anshakapa Trubhyascha, Epasindhivyacha, Itanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavebyo, Namo Namaha.
All glories to you, Maharaj. Thank you so much for giving your valuable time. And it's been a long time. Last year, after Dinabandhu Prabhu's marriage, we didn't hear you. We didn't have your association. Generally, we have in October. Somehow we missed it.
Oh, I think I came since then. I came in, yeah, not last year, but the October the
before year, yeah.
November.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me give quick introduction, Maharaj, and then we can get started. You can give. Sure. His Holiness Janananda Goswami Maharaj is a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, was initiated in ISKCON London, joined in ISKCON London and initiated in 1972 by Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj served in various countries around the world, but in the last few years, he has really dedicated himself to supporting ISKCON France Yatra. For most of the lockdown, Maharaj has been serving at ISKCON New Mayapur, France, engaged in variety of practical services, providing much support to the devotees in trying to maintain the project. Sri Prabhupada stayed in New Mayapur 3 times and installed Sri Sri Krishna Balram. New Mayapur is a farm community, and the temple, which is an old French castle, is the only remaining ISKCON property in Europe where Sri Prabhupada has stayed. Janananda Goswami Maharaj is an exceptional practitioner and exponent of Kirtan, Harinam, and book distribution in the line of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Maharaj's quick wit, humility, and loving personal nature is very uplifting and inspires all of us to take shelter of the lotus feet of Sri Prabhupada and Lord Krishna. Maharaj has several disciples in the New Jersey area, and Maharaj is looking forward to visit us again in the future. And I'll also, add that, add the another line also. Also, his scholarliness in the Shastras, witty nature, humility, and many other transcendental qualities attracts even the most fallen souls to the lotus feet of Sri Prabhupada and Lord Krishna. So, thank you so much, Maharaj. Krishna Vina Shakti Na Itare Pravartam. So, unless Krishna gives the energy, we cannot do anything, nor preaching, nor we can transform. But Maharaj, we can see by he's carrying the potency, energy of Sri Prabhupada, Lord Krishna. So he's able to transform so many souls. Thank you so much, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So, shall I begin?
Yes, Maharaj, please.
And we have 1 hour, is that correct?
Yes, Maharaj. And if you would like to have a Q&A for a few minutes, 10 minutes or so, you can do so after 8 o'clock, after 9 o'clock, which is your 3 o'clock maybe. Or if you want to do it before, that's
Om Jnana-timirandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Tapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaya Dadati Swavadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivim Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Vanchako Putulubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Jai Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman ki Jai, Shri Ramayan ki Jai. Hare Krishna. Descendant of Ikshvaku, King Dashrath was his name. Righteous and heroic, he ruled Ayodhya of fame. He received 4 mighty sons, Ram, the loved of his heart, full of infinite potencies, Vishnu in a human part. To give Kaikeyi her boons, into exile Rama was sent. Upholder of his father's vow, with Sita and Lakshman he went. When Ram killed the Rakshasas, who filled the rishis with fear, Ravana kidnapped Sita with the help of Maricha, the deer. Then in his search for Sita, Ram made Sugriva a friend. To search the southern quarter, I, Hanuman, did he send. After crossing many mountains, I jumped the ocean vast, and thus I have succeeded in finding you at last. Ram will come to save you, his dearly beloved wife. Now, give me a little message to save your husband's life. This little English rendition of a poem was spoken by Hanuman when he finally found Sita Devi in the Ashok Grove of Lanka, just to attract Sita's attention, give her some confidence. Now, when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was traveling through the south of India, I cannot recollect the name of the village, but he came across one Brahmin who was a great devotee of Lord Rama. And he's mentioned by the name Ramdas Vipra. In other words, he was a Brahmin and he was a devotee of Lord Ram. And this Brahmin was in very great distress, to such an extent that he was fasting. He would not eat. Lord Ramchandra was curious, and he explained, how can I eat when this rascal Ravana has kidnapped the universal mother Sita? Lord Chaitanya tried to console him that that's not the case, but still he was very disturbed. Lord Chaitanya then came across further on his travels an excerpt from the Kurma Purana. And in the Kurma Purana, it explained quite clearly, very famous. There are different versions, but the principle is the same. That when Ravana came to that Panchavati in the Dandakaranya forest with the intentions of kidnapping Sita Devi for his own sensual pleasure. And of course, that's a famous story which in one sense, is the turning point of one of the turning points of the Ramayana. One of the major turning points, all the major turning points involve the, let's say, the effect of the woman, in this case, Sita Devi. And as Ravana approached with his plan, of course, Rama and Lakshmana had been drawn away by various means. And Ravana came to the cottage and enticed Sita Devi. And in his mind, of course, he kidnapped Sita Devi against her will. However, in the Kurma Purana, it describes how when Sita Devi saw Ravana, she disappeared. And instead, she manifested her Jayasita, her shadow, reflection. Maya Sita is the word used. Just like the internal potency, Yoga Maya, expands as Mahamaya to bewilder all the conditioned souls in this world, to identify themselves with the body and think that which they're seeing is real. Similarly, Sita Devi manifested this form of Maya Sita. And it was that form, although appeared to be the same, characteristics, behavior, many things the same, but actually just like a shadow of the real, or a reflection, we could say, more specific, of the real Sita Devi. Sita Devi was under the protection of Agni Dev during the whole episode. He took shelter. Sometimes it said she took shelter of Parvati. But she was sheltered. She was not visible. The truth is, with material senses, Atakshi Krishna Namadina Bhavadvayan Indra, one cannot perceive the transcendence. Sita Devi, as I'm sure we're all at least theoretically aware, is the eternal consort of Lord Ram and totally transcendental. She does not have a physical form as such. Although we may hear the pastimes of Sita Devi, they may be presented in visual forms, etc. And by the grace of pure devotees, we may get some inkling of the nature of Sita Devi. But to actually see, according to Rupa Goswami and other scriptures, describe that with material senses, we cannot perceive the transcendence. Ravana, there is no way Ravana could perceive the transcendental form of Sita. Only the reflection. And we all know how much we're captivated by the reflection of the internal potency manifested in the various forms before our eyes and ears and tongue, etc. Very captivating. So we can imagine that in this world there are many captivating objects of our senses, specifically the form of a woman. Even the reflective form in this world is so captivating by the influence of Cupid. That captivation captures the heart of the conditioned soul in a male body, maybe. We all go through male bodies, and because of our captivation with females, we receive a female body. But actually, it's the tendency of the living entity to think that I am the Purusha, that I am the enjoyer of this material energy. This is the illusion which we are in, seeing ourselves in the center. This is the nature of the conditioned soul, Ravana being the epitome of a materialistic, self-centered individual, seeing everything in relationship to himself. Friends and enemies, attractions and repulsions. And if anything gets in his way, anger, etc., becomes uncontrollable. We know from Bhagavad Gita that we are meant to become freed of attachment and anger and fear and so on. But for a materialistic person who identifies themselves with their form, this is impossible to become free of. Not just a question of control, it's a question of understanding the cause and finding the real, let's say, solution. The cause is our identification with this material body and this material world, and seeing ourselves as the enjoyer. The solution is to identify everything with Krishna and to see Krishna as a solution. Taking shelter of Krishna. The Ramayana is such an amazing story, we can say. It's a story usually it may indicate something fictional, and in the eyes of most persons in this world, it is a fictional, mythological, Hindu, whatever. Something that somebody wrote at some point of time, some love story, some story of some man who's infatuated with his wife to the extent that he will annihilate a whole race of Rakshasas, etc. Of course, anyone who has any good fortune knows that this is not the case. Rama, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ayana, one who gives shelter or protection. It can also mean path or journey, many different meanings of Ayana. The path of Ram, the protection of Ram. Ramayana affords us protection from the influence of Mahamaya, so that we do not become victimized like Ravana, to wish to try to capture the consort of the Lord. This is basically the condition of every living entity. It may not be on the scale of Ravana, pretty high scale. But even on a small scale, seeing a grain of sugar for my pleasure, seeing a sunrise for my pleasure, whatever it is, a chocolate, an ice cream, a movie, a boy, a girl, money. Yes, Ravana liked money. We all know that very much so. Lived in the city of gold, Lanka. He loved wealth and opulence and beautiful women. This is the nature of material bondage. It may not seemingly manifest to such a degree, but it is the root, we could say, manifesting in various lesser forms of, quantitatively speaking and even qualitatively speaking, of attractions in this world, but nonetheless it is the root, to try to enjoy with me in the center. Ravenous, the word Ravana, sometimes you can say ravenous, to try to enjoy. So today we'll discuss a little bit about Rama and Ramayana. Some of the, maybe we won't have much time, I'm afraid. We could go for maybe hours and hours, but just little time is at our disposal. And Lord Ramachandra, in these pastimes, is kindly, as we know from Bhagavad Gita, Janma Karma Kimadivya, one who understands these transcendental pastimes and activities and the appearance of the Lord in this world does not have to take birth again. So to understand them requires hearing from the right source. And by the arrangement of the Lord, these pastimes were all recorded by Valmiki. We have the Valmiki Ramayana, the authorized presentation of these wonderful pastimes of Lord Ramchandra, which are particularly, let's say, attractive, even without faith, even without devotion practically. We find people and cultures have embraced to some degree at least, the Ramayana. Even here in France, one of our devotees is a teacher. He's a teacher for little children, French children, part-time teacher for French children. And their favorite story, which he tells them, is Ramayana. They know all the characters. Little 4 or 5-year-old kids, French kids. And they know all the characters. They love Hanuman. They know who Sita and Ram and Lakshman and Ravana and all these things they've heard from him. And they love to hear the stories. Captivating. This is a special mercy, particularly in Kali Yuga. People like to hear adventures. Ramayana is full of adventures. It's full of intrigue. It's full of mystery. There's love affairs. It's got all the various characteristics of a story, a drama, and whatever it is. Everything is there. And what to speak of the great battle of Lanka, which makes one's hairs stand on end just by hearing it. Such a battle would never, I don't think any other battle on the history of the universe, practically speaking, compares with this battle of Lanka. Even more so than the Kurukshetra war, even more so. Quite an amazing description given by Valmiki. So now I'm going to, let's see, what are we going to do? I'm going to try to share something. As you may be well aware, in this episode of Ramayana, on several occasions, it appeared that Ram rejected Sita. And in the last, I could say, Kunda, the last section of this Ramayana, there we find how Ram sent Sita. Interesting, Sita Devi, she wanted to see, she was pregnant, maybe for 11, many thousands of years residing in Ayodhya, enjoying their company. Ram was governing the kingdom. And it so happened, as all great kings do, he would send his, in disguise, sometimes his ministers, his spies, to see whether or not the citizens were happy. So one of his ministers reported back that actually there is talk in Ayodhya. Some people are criticizing you, my dear Lord Ram, that you have taken back a woman who resided in the house of another. This man was actually angry with his wife because she stayed out somewhere overnight. And he said, I don't want to accept you back. I am not a hen-pecked husband like Ram, who accepted his wife back after being captive in the hands of Ram. When Ram heard that, he became very thoughtful. And to cut the long story short, he decided to banish Sita Devi again. He rejected her, basically. Not in his heart. This is all part of the divine plan of the Lord. But externally to mundane eyes, it appeared like this. At the same time, as we mentioned, Sita was pregnant, and she requested Ram, I really have one request, my Lord. Rama asked her if there's anything she wanted. He said, there's one thing. I'd like to again see all those hermitages of the sages, because when they were exiled, when Dasharat, Kaikeyi, exiled Ramchandra to the forest many years before, they had visited many, many hermitages of great sages, Bharadvaj, Valmiki also, so many other great sages, along the banks of the various rivers, particularly the Ganges. She very much wanted to see them again, simultaneous to this incident. So Ram consulted with Lakshman and Sumantra, the royal servant, who had previously been the servant of Dasharat, now of Ram, to very confidentially, he spoke with them about the situation. And he requested Lakshman to perform this most, you could say, unwanted act. And Lakshman was heartbroken. But he had to fulfill his brother's desire. So, on the guise, of course, of going on a pleasure trip to the river Ganges, and other hermitages, Sita Devi very much wanted. So she was very enthusiastic the next morning when Sumantra and Lakshman approached her to go on this pleasure trip. And they set off on the journey. Little did Sita know what her fate was. And when they reached the Ganges, crossed the river Ganges, at that point, Valmiki, not far from Valmiki's ashram, at that point, Lakshman, Sumantra was already aware of the situation, and Lakshman then explained to Sita that he was leaving her there, and why. Yet another devastation to Sita in her lifetime with Ram. Disappointment after disappointment, you could say. This is the nature of the material world. We may try to adjust everything. Again, it's not really the material world. This is the spiritual world we're talking. It appears to us in the material. Somebody is enthusiastically joining us there. But the material world is a heartbreaking place. Relationships, Mother Sita said essentially. It's as if I've come to this world to suffer. One, pain after another. Material world, it's like this. So showing this reality through these pastimes. Of course, in the case of Sita and Ram, as in the case of Radha and Krishna, as in the case of Vishnu, Priya and Gauranga Mahaprabhu, and all the residents of Navadvip, the residents of Vrindavan, the residents of Ayodhya, etc. throwing everyone into intense Palambabhav, intense feeling, unbearable practically, but so intense absorption in let's say, in the object of one's life, Vipalambabhav, which intensifies the loving exchange. We sometimes say absence makes the heart grow fonder. You say it's not necessary. Many of these apparent separations of Ram and Sita and Lakshman from their family, or Sita Devi from Ram. But we have lessons to learn. We become so insanely attached to our families, insanely attached to our objects of sense gratification. We will not let go. But the ultimate reality is we're forced to let go. By hearing of these pastimes, of Sita Ram, Ramayana, etc., one can be freed of these bondages if we hear with a completely open, faithful heart, which we may not do. We may be still covered with lust and anger and greed, just like Ravana. Ravana, the character, amazing character. We just don't have time to get into it. So many wonderful aspects, but just one thing. When he was born, of course, his mother was like a Rakshasi who approached Vishrava, the father of Brahminical, father of Ravana, who was very attracted, and she wanted to have union with him. But she approached her very inauspicious time. Very inauspicious. And Vishrava said, you will have these 4 children who will be Rakshasi, 3 sons, 1 daughter. The first one will be, terrifying the whole universe. You will have 10 heads and 20 arms. The second one will be a monster. Complete monster. The third one will be a Rakshasi sister. Oh, vile character. She was so scared when she heard this. She appealed and she said, okay, the 4th one will be a pious man of righteousness. So sure enough, she gave birth to these offspring, and the first one brought, even as he appeared, the whole universe shuddered. With his 10 heads, he was named Dasagriva, which literally means one who has 10 necks. Obviously 10 necks would have 10 heads. And he was terrorizing the universe. As he grew. So many things. He got boons from Brahma that he would never be killed by any celestial being or Naga, Rakshasa, Yaksha, this or that. But he did not ask immunity from humans, thinking humans are uselessly impotent. I don't need to fear them. But every other kind of powerful entity within the universe and the weapons they hold, he was immune from them. So he felt himself basically unconquerable. And he overwhelmed his half-brother, Vishrava, through another wife, had another son, Kuvara. And Kuvara was very pious. Of course, he was a demigod. And Ravana also overcame him in battle. And he captured the Pushpaka, this very mystical airplane, which could travel at anywhere, any speed, etc. Very unique vehicle which he would travel in. He was traveling all over, viewing the Earth planet in different places. And Ravana came one time to the Himalayas. And one of the major features of Ravana was his infatuation with beautiful women. And suddenly, from his airplane, he saw a very spectacular scene in the Himalayas in a valley. He saw this beautiful, although she was there alone in the middle of the Himalayas, dressed like an ascetic lady, with basically deer skin and matted locks, and she was just sitting there, this most gorgeously attractive female. His heart was captured as usual, and he came down to the ground and approached that lady with intent to capture her, to take her back to Lanka. She reproached him and said, "No, you cannot. I have given my heart to Lord Vishnu. I want no one else as my husband. So I am performing austerities here to attain my heart's goal." Ravana, who is this Vishnu compared to me? Like we'll say in this material world, who is this Krishna? I don't see him. Me, I'm the greatest. He tried to win her over, but she was not in any way swayed. So he then decided force is the only means. Sweet words will not work, then force is the only thing. So he tried to grab her by the hair. The easiest thing to grab from a lady. At least if they, nowadays, unfortunately, ladies are cutting their hair and looking awful. But they do anyway. Sorry about that. But it's not the nature of a lady. So he grabbed her long locks by her mystic power. She transformed her arm into like a sword and sliced the hair off. And he was stood there just holding a little bit of hair. He said, because I have been touched by you, you wretched creature, I will now enter the fire and leave this body. But I assure you, I will take birth again in a female form, and I will be your death. Powerful words. She was a powerful ascetic. Of course, she was a goddess of fortune, but she was appearing in this way. But she immediately appeared again on a nearby lotus. And this time, Ravana kidnapped, captured her. But again, this is the same thing. It was not the real Veda. Her name was Vedavati in that form, the real Vedavati, but it was like a reflection. And he carried her off to Lanka. And when he got to Lanka, many of his cohorts, somehow or another, some of the ministers and some of his family members had a little bit of sense about them. They could see that Ravana was sometimes behaving in ways which were going to be for his own ill detriment. So they advised him, don't keep this woman, don't keep her. She will be the end of our race. At that time, sometimes Ravana would listen. Sometimes he listened, just like he listened to Maricha at first. When Ravana approached Maricha to try to help him to kidnap Sita, Marisha first said, don't talk like this. This is madness. You foolish king. You're going to cause your own death and the death of all of us. You don't know who this Ram is. He's not just a human being. He's invincible. He could destroy the universe, what to speak of us. Because he previously had this experience when Ram was asked by Vishwamitra to come and help clear away these demons who were attacking their yajna. Ram was just a 16-year-old teenage boy. And he went against the will of Dasarath, of course, along with Lakshman, to the ashram of Vishwamitra. And sure enough, when they were performing a yajna, the demons appeared in the sky. This Maricha, Sabahu appeared in the sky. Two great demons with many other Rakshasas suddenly appeared in the sky, raining down pus, blood, bones, horrible things, stool, crashing down, rocks, fire, everything coming down, destroying everything. So that time Ram took his bow and he shot one arrow and sent Maricha flying 100 yojanas, 800 miles into the ocean with one arrow. And he killed Sabahu and the others with other arrows. So Maricha knew just how powerful he was. Just how powerful. And how, of course, he'd single-handedly killed in Janananda, how he killed Kar and the other 14,000 Rakshasas single-handedly in 2 hours. You know how powerful he was. He was terrified of Ram. And he said, "You don't do this." Ravana was convinced by Maricha. He went back to Lanka. But then, lo and behold, Suparnaka, his sister, arrived there with her, disfigured face, Lakshman having cut off her nose and ears, etc. Screaming and crying, "What a useless king you are. You're sitting here like this, you fool. When in your kingdom, your two brothers have been slain, and the army's slain, and your sister have been disfigured by this wretched human, and you're sitting here enjoying yourself in Lanka, you rascal." She chastised him severely. Ravana was taken aback. Then she started to explain, "Now, what am I going to do? How am I going to deal with this? I can tell you how you can kill this or destroy this Ram." And then she gave him the plan with Sita Devi, how Ravana could actually overcome Ram, because he was infatuated with his wife, Sita Devi, his only wife. There's another story, another lesson, of course. So she explained to her the beauty of Sita, and Ravana's heart couldn't control his emotions. His lust swelled up, overflowing lust. "I must get this Sita." That if you capture Sita, then Ram will be finished. Don't worry. So he was convinced. So they made the plan. Then he went back to Maricha, said, "Yes, I'd want you to help me in this plot to kidnap Sita." Maricha, this is madness. It's crazy. Don't do it. That if you don't help me to do this, I will kill you. Okay, better I die at the hands of Ram than die at your hands. So he agreed. And the story unfolded, which most of you are familiar with. And like that. So when Ram, we're going to go back now because our time is running out. So we're going back now to the ashram of Valmiki. Lakshmana abandoned Sita Devi there. Crying and crying and crying. Sita was rolling on the ground. Her life was over. She said, if I was not pregnant, I would immediately give up my life. But inside my womb is the only remaining descendants of the Ikshvaku dynasty, or at least the next descendants. You can say the other brothers of Ram also had children, but from her husband's side, these were the only hope for her line. So she had the two twins within her womb. Meanwhile, some of the disciples of Valmiki heard a lady crying nearby. They reported to Valmiki. Valmiki already knew exactly what was going on by his mystic potency. So he had them bring her there. He went there and brought her to his ashram. Do not worry. There are many ascetic ladies here who will treat you just like that daughter. You can stay here very protected, peacefully, have no fear. So she remained there. And in due course of time, gave birth, of course, to the two boys, Ram, back in Ayodhya. For him, it was unbearable pain, also being separated from his eternal consort. Valmiki trained the boys in all various arts, skills of various kinds. And he particularly trained them, or let's say, in music, poetry, recitation, and he taught them the entire Ramayana. Because earlier, Valmiki was there one time, Narada Muni came to his ashram, and Valmiki had asked Narada, please tell me on this earth, who is the greatest personality? Narada Muni said, by far and away, the greatest personality is the most pious king of all, Lord Ramchandra. And he wanted to know more about him. Narada Muni instructed Valmiki to actually compile the pastimes of Lord Ram. And he said, if you go in meditating, everything will be revealed to you. So Valmiki went into deep, deep meditation on the pastimes of Ram. And you may know that pastime also. One time nearby Valmiki's ashram, he heard a sound, Valmiki heard this sound, and he saw that a hunter had mercilessly shot this crouched bird who was engaged in loving reciprocation with its mate. He shot him dead. And the poor partner was crying and crying, losing its mate. And Valmiki suddenly became angry and became, we could say, cursed this hunter. He said, why have I suddenly become angry? He was very taken aback, this sudden burst of anger. He spoke in such a way, it was in a very special meter, poetic meter, which he never heard before. It was as if some other force had spoken through him. But he felt very bad after this incident. But then Lord Brahma appeared and assured him, it was I who spoke these words through you, because it is in this meter that you will compile the Ramayana. So he thought out of Shokan, because he was lamenting like anything about what he did. Lamentation is another incredible, let's say, characteristic of the Ramayana. So much lamentation, so much anger, etc., appears to be manifested in various pastimes. So he said, out of shoka, lamentation, has come shloka, the proper meter, the proper method of compiling the Ramayana. And then he went about compiling in verses, many 24,000 verses, the Ramayana. And he taught this to the two twin sons of Ram. Of course, the boys, they knew they were sons of Ram. They heard everything in the Ramayana and from their mother Sita. I talked to them many times about their father. Naturally, they were curious. And time came when Ramchandra decided he would perform a horse sacrifice. He called all of his ministers. This was towards the closing part of his earthly pastimes. He called all of his ministers together to discuss, etc., what to do. And I also thought it's a great idea to perform this horse sacrifice for benefit of everyone. And they made all kinds of arrangements to perform this great ceremony. In the meantime, Valmiki, being all-knowing, said to the two twins, now is the time. Just like sometimes we're sent out on Sankirtan, he sent them out on Sankirtan to glorify the Lord by reciting Ramayana everywhere. In this particular meter, they were very expert musicians. They would accompany the recital with lutes, with musical sounds, very poetic, everything perfectly poetic. And he said, you should go to Ayodhya. And if Ram somehow calls you into the court, recite Ramayana before him and all the members of the court. And if he asks you who you are, just tell him you are disciples of Valmiki. So they went to Ayodhya. And in the streets of Ayodhya, they were singing so beautifully the pastimes of Ram. He came to the attention of Ram and he asked his ministers to call them to the court so that everyone could hear. They came there and began to recite the Ramayana before Ramchandra. I just read I was going to read a lot, but time doesn't allow, so I just read a little. As Lava and Kush began the narration of the beautiful epic poem, Ram and his brothers soon forgot everything else, becoming fully absorbed in hearing the Ramayana. The bonds of material existence can be completely cut by simply chanting and hearing the Lord's glories. Wouldn't that be nice? Completely cutting all our bonds. This is the secret of, again and again we hear it, of cutting our bonds, becoming freed from attachment to this world, is to become attached to the pastimes of the Lord. This is the mission of Krishna consciousness. This is the mission. Now, one thing I just mentioned before we finish and forget is that Lord Ram, in a sense, in banishing Sita Devi, in rejecting her on other occasions, apparent rejection, although not really rejecting, and then feeling intense sorrow and pain in his own heart, we can understand that the living entities in this world and the energies of this world belong to Krishna. We belong to Krishna. Everything belongs to Krishna. But because we have this free will, we are seeing it separately from Krishna, as ourselves and the energies separate. This brings great pain to the Lord. Pain. Even though the material world is a reflection, the living entities are not a reflection. They're just captivated by the reflection. This brings pain to the Lord, both from the point of view of the suffering of the living entities and, in a sense, his own parts and parcels being separate, just like we would if our child was separated from us or our beloved. Brings pain. Therefore, just as the Hanuman and all the monkeys, Sugriva and the whole team gave their life and soul to try to reunite Sita with Ram, this is the Sankirtan movement. It's a movement that simply is not another cult, is not another religion. Sankirtan means the movement to reunite everything with Krishna. That's all. Consciousness, objective, everything. Reunited with Krishna. This is the same principle as when Ram enlisted the assistance of the monkeys in retrieving Sita. Sankirtan mission. So with the same determination and spirit which the Hanuman particularly displayed, we should also try to absorb ourselves in Sankirtan. This is the practical process of removing all of these illusory ideas that I am the Purush, that I am the enjoyer, and the reality will manifest instead of the illusion all the time. So we're coming to the end, and we haven't started. There's life. And I'll just read a little bit after the very end. Thereafter, Ram listened with unbound pleasure as Lav and Kush recited the Ramayana for many days. At last, Ram concluded, these boys must be the twin sons of Sita. There is no doubt of it. Ram's heart melted due to affection to his sons. After considering the matter very deeply, he called for messengers with impeccable etiquette. He ordered them go at once to the ashram of the great sage Valmiki and speak to him the following words. If Sita is indeed blameless, if her character is faultlessly pure, then let her come here with your sanction so that she can prove her innocence before all the assembled citizens. Hurry back quickly, their replies. He wanted Sita. So Sita, when she heard this, you could say this was the last straw. Ram didn't even come himself, that he sent some messengers. Sometimes it said it was Lakshman, sometimes not. There are different descriptions of this pastime. But according to Valmiki Ramayana, this is how we're going. And she decided, no, this is not. I've been humiliated too many times now. This is enough. And so she did. She put on the cloth of renunciation, orange cloth, fiery cloth, disheveled her hair, etc. And she went to Ayodhya. But let's see. Finally, Valmiki arrived, followed by Sita. Her head bent low, her hands joined in supplication. Tears filled her large eyes, Ram firmly fixed in her heart. Everyone was anticipant, of course. And Valmiki handed, here is the impeccable, righteous Sita. She is completely pure, totally fixed on you, as before the fire god, when she entered the fire, the Maya Sita entered the fire, and the real Sita came out. So many times she had to go through various trials. And explain the situation, but I've never seen her utter a lie. She's never made anything. He said, If Sita is tainted by even the slightest guilt, then may the results of my accumulated austerities prove eternally fruitless. The words of Valmiki. He's completely, absolutely, 100%. She's completely pure. Like that. So, and Ram gazed on Sita for a moment and announced to the assembly, so be it. I accept all that the great Rishi has said. Previously, the demigods also testified to her purity. I took her back to Ayodhya. But people began to criticize. Now I decided if Sita can prove her innocence before this assembly, I again accept her as my wife. Everyone was silent. How will she prove her innocence? So he said to the assembly, O goddess of earth, please hear my petition. If since the time of my marriage I ever thought of anyone but Ram, or if I ever loved any man but Ram, then refuse me shelter. However, if I have only dwelt in Ram in thought, word, and action, please give me a place within you so that I need not experience the shame of facing these slanderous people. So at that point, the earth opened up and, of course, Sita entered into the earth. And of course, it was a devastation to Ram and everybody else, but nobody could stop it. It's actually said at that time that Lakshman, although he'd been rebuked by Sita, and when they reached Kishkindia, and Ram and Lakshman met, Sugriva actually was keeping some of Sita's ornaments, which she'd thrown down when she saw the monkeys on top of the mountain there. And Ram asked Lakshman, are these the ornaments of Sita? And Lakshman said, I have no idea. I've never seen anything but her feet. She never looked at her. This is another essential teaching of Ramayana. We're always looking for sense gratification wherever we can see it. Always looking for pleasure in this world. Looking at the forms of others, etc. Not realizing that everything is meant for the pleasure of Ram. Yeah, consciousness, we have to cultivate the consciousness of fixing our consciousness on the lotus feet of the Lord. Not the lotus feet of Sita, that's the privilege of Ram. But certainly we don't look at the form in the sense to see it as an object of enjoyment. It's meant for Krishna's pleasure, Ram's pleasure. So in this way, Sita departed, of course, shortly after that. In their eternal abode, they were always united, but reunited. So this is just little towards the ending pastimes of Ramayana. And after that, Ram and all of his eternal associates returned to the spiritual sky. And Ramayana drew to a close. I don't have any more time, unfortunately. We'd love to share dozens more pastimes. For 2 plus 205 here, 805. No, 205 there. No, here. 805, 905 there in New York. So I guess we'll have to close shop because that's it. Time has expired. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for your heart-melting presentation.
Ramayana, and many of you are fully familiar with Ramayana far more than I. I'll tell you frankly, I read the Ramayana before I ever heard of the Hare Krishna movement. It was the first time in my life which I could read a book without stopping. And that was when I was studying my final exams, my degree. I couldn't study because I was reading the Ramayana. And at the same time, taking my final, this is the real business of human life, not to take all of these mundane qualifications, which simply are like lead weights around our neck unless they're offered to Krishna. And attractions for years, objects, etc., just dragging us down to birth after birth. But to hear these pastimes of Ramayana, and of course, we're just talking Ramayana today, but it could be primarily Srimad Bhagavatam, etc. Cut these bondages which we have. Karma bandhana. By remembering the personal Godhead, the knots, this karma bandhana can be cut. This is our prayer that by the mercy of Sitaram, Lakshman, Hanuman, and all of their associates, that our bondage can be cut and that we don't become many Ravanas, or we become freed from becoming many Ravanas. Hare Krishna. So what next? Tell me.
Two questions are there, Maharaj. Julian
Sure.
Prabhu has a question. Bhakti Ratnakar Prabhu has a question.
Can I read them? Are they on chat?
Yes, Julian Prabhu's question is on the chat. Go ahead, Maharaj.
Many of Krishna's pastimes are a celebration of the Lord's pleasure, but these pastimes of Sitaram are full of pain. Yes, they're not full of pain. There is a lot of pleasure too, by the way. But the tendency is that the painful aspects are often the ones that become, very prominent. I mean, there are many extraordinary pleasurable pastimes, and many we don't hear about. Sometimes how much do we hear of the 14 years exile? The last year we hear a lot. We don't hear much in between. But it is in some of the Ramayans is described how actually the Lord was experiencing conjugal Madhurya Ras with Sita Devi during those years. Much of the time, because there were killing of demons, just like there were demons who attacked Vrindavan. But Krishna's internal pastimes were going on eternally. And actually, Ram and Sita were never really separated. They were always together in the apricot lila. But from the external point of view, they were performing these pastimes, and different persons were taking different roles for many, many reasons. Try to understand that ultimately, what we see in the pastimes is meant for our benefit, for us to learn. And if there was no pain in his life, we would never want to give it up. We would never want to change anything. So the pain is there, and we can identify it. And by hearing these pastimes of Sitaram, Dasarat, the pain he went through and the attachment he had naturally to his sons, etc., the pain there, heartbreaking. He could only live a few more days after Ram, not even one day after Ram left Ayodhya. The pain, so many, as you say, of different kinds of there. But we go through these things in our lifetime, separation from our own bodies eventually, of course, humiliation, and so many things, failures, etc., criticisms, people leaving us, family members leaving us. There's one poem, I don't know, I can't find it on the just like that, but there's one poem of Ravana, and he says in that poem, I don't have it here, but I do have it, but I don't know where it is. I searched the whole Ramayana just to find one poem. But Ravana described how, it was like when Vibhishan turned against him, Ravana, of course, was Vibhishan was his best friend. He was a minister, but here it is. I'll read this poem, which Ravana then spoke, because Vibhishan was one of the few. There were one or two others. His maternal uncle or something Malayavan, one or two of them were trying to advise Ravan, give her back, give her back, give her back, you fool. You're going to kill us all. But he wouldn't listen, especially Bibhishan. Bibhishan was extremely determined to save his brother. But his brother basically said, if you weren't my brother, I would kill you on the spot. You get out of here. He practically just told him, get lost. He wouldn't listen to him. He was so infatuated. He was the only one who was brave enough to really speak up. So then Ravana said, fire and weapons we do not fear. The dangerous are the so-called near and dear. They are the ones who take special pains to make sure that we are all put in chains. And we may not see it like that, but that's what's going on in this world. We're becoming bound up in chains. So another major aspect of Ramayana is duty. Following one's duty, honesty, truthfulness, dutiful according to Shastra, teaching how to properly respect others. So there is duty in family life. And if we follow that duty properly, according to Vedic directives, then although we may be bound up, entangled, we'll become gradually released. We'll wake up from our dream and realize a little bit maybe. So otherwise, we're trying always to adjust things so there's no pain, trying to keep everything at my disposal. It's mine. I want to enjoy it. It's my family. And everything, and then when things don't go right, we become angry and this, that, and the other. It's unavoidable. This is the material world of duality. Dukalayam Shashvatam. You can't take it away. The nature of this world. So it's just a transcendental, we could say, medicinal cure to our addiction to this material world is to hear the pastimes of Ramayana and Bhagavatam. More so, it takes us further, you could say. But to hear Krishna Katha is the secret to releasing us. Whatever form that Krishna Katha takes, it will purify us of that particular aspect. We suffer pain. That pain can be released by hearing of the pain. Not to say that we won't suffer pain physically still, but the real pain is the cause. Let's say the cause of the pain. It's removal of the cause of the pain. Not so much the immediate pain, but the cause of the pain, which is our false identity, by hearing these pastimes. And there, as I mentioned earlier, there's another aspect, which is the internal one in the form of the Lord and his associates, which is the Vipulamba Bhav. Complete absorption in remembering Lord Ramchandra. Complete absorption. And that's the goal of our lives. We're at the moment, you can't say we're experiencing Vipulamba Bhav, we're experiencing forgetfulness of Krishna and consequent material sufferings. But it is a form, you could say, of that separation. And we just have to fill that separated form with remembrance of Krishna, remembrance of Ram, and not just lamenting over mundane things, pitying, oh, poor me, why is this happening to me? Oh, me. Taking shelter of Ram. Yes, we can understand, we may be in a state of humility, I deserve this, but simply take shelter of Ram, take shelter of Krishna, take shelter of Mahaprabhu, like this. Through happiness and distress, whatever the duality, becoming undisturbed in happiness and distress. Okay, Jalama. I only see one question. I don't see another question.
Maharaj, Bhakti Ratnakar Prabhu, if you are there, go ahead with your question, please.
Pardon?
Yeah. Thank you, Krishna. Naman Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Maharaj, Dandvat Pranam. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and you. Thanks for giving a totally new nectar from the same story which we know, but the nectar was definitely very juicy and new and tasty. Maharaj, same question on Julian Prabhu's line that just a little extension that Ramayana, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Chaitanya Charitamrita and Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur's life all were full of lamentations only, Prabhuji, but still they evolved very high. I wanted to see that how we can also, but you answered in the Julian Prabhu's question. Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Thank you, Tan. We should be lamenting that so many people have not got Prabhupada's books. That so many people, including ourselves sometimes, are completely, let's say, failing to take this opportunity as a human form of life. So many people are avoiding the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There's a room for anger. And the anger that displayed by Ram and by the monkeys, by Lakshman and Dasarat, when KK asked for those boons, and there's lamentation and anger swelling in his heart. So many emotions are there, but they're being used in the right way because they're being used by the fact that, you're separating the living entity from Ram. You're separating Sita from Ram. These are causes of anger and lamentation if we can't do anything about it, you could say. But we don't just live in lamentation. Lamentation, as many times in the Ramayana we'll see, sometimes even Ram became so lamentable he almost gave up. Also searching for Sita. But then, when somebody would remind Hanuman, somebody would come forward, Angada, someone would come forward. And what is it? We're not going to get anywhere by lamentation. That's not going to get us there, God. It doesn't alone. But it can be a trigger for us to take shelter of Ram, become absorbed in Ram.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Amritanand Prabhu, last question. Go ahead, Amritanand Prabhu.
Hare
Who's
Krishna.
this?
Please accept my respect.
Who's this?
Maharaj,
Who is
this
this?
Janananda.
Switch on your video, Amritanand Prabhu, if you can.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Krishna Maharaj. Can you hear me?
I don't know. Anyway, whoever it is, thank you.
Maharaj, this is Nrityanandas. Please accept my humble obeisance. All Krishna Srila Prabhupada.
Nityananda.
Yes.
Nityananda, CJ.
Nityananda Maharaj. So Maharaj, firstly, thank you very much. Specifically, the pastime when you narrated of Lord Lakshmana and the jewelry of Mother Sita. And he says that, I've never looked anything beyond her feet. And that moved you to tears, Maharaj. This particular pastime we've heard many times, and different instructions, different Vaishnavas have given. But what I gathered from this pastime, Maharaj, is the quality of a Vaishnav who is para dukha dukhi, and how you tied it up to the fact that we are all caught up in sense gratification. So I think that was very inspiring, and thank you very much for that. Maharaj, my question is related to Lord Ramchandra is known as the Purushottam, the ultimate human. And whatever happens over here, the Lord enacts his Leela so that he can give instructions to the common man. So there's always some learning, even though it may seem contradictory and way beyond our understanding, there is a learning. So even this Agni Pariksha, now we can understand Lord Rama was totally devoted to his wife. And even though as a king, he could have multiple wives, his heart was just for Mother Sita. And then this pastime where she is banished, and then she's made to go through that Agni Pariksha, through the test of fire, and so forth. So it is like the woman is put through a lot of tests, etc., and that too by the ultimate man. Now, how is it we understand that in our relation to women, we don't use this example of Lord Rama and say it, okay, Rama was being very severe and strict with his wife. How does a common man not look at that as an example or set a precedence? and say that now this is also
Yeah,
how
well, my understanding is the whole idea is that we have to, we're talking from a man's point of view here, from the lady's point of view, there's another aspect. But from the man's point of view, you have to become one. All these things, and there's a tendency, as you say, to take advantage of certain aspects of, Vedic directions or instructions regarding how women should be submissive to a husband no matter what their character are, which Sita Devi many times explained and expressed. But the man is the first priority. They have to be of character which is impeccable. Not that they're lust and greed and anger and etc. is their predominant guiding force. They have to be responsible, 100% responsible for the protection of their wives. They have to take that responsibility. It's not just a question of telling them what to do because you want them to do something. It's actually a protection, fulfilling their goal in life. The wife is half the body of the man in tradition, in proper marriage. And the husband's responsibility is to take the wife back to Godhead. And that's his duty. And his wife is the dearest thing to him because she's his assistant in this way, but he has to play his part. The man has to be responsible. We rarely find that. So how do we expect the wife to play her part when the husband's not playing his part? It's a two-way thing. So how do we do that? This husband and wife putting Krishna in the center of our lives. This is the secret. In the case of Sita and Ram, they are the center of our lives. Radha and Krishna are the center of our lives. They should be. They're just displaying in a way as Krishna appears in this world in a human-like form, so that we can identify a little bit with this and learn. As you say, learn. But our duty as the husband is to deliver the wife back to God and the children, everyone.
Maharaj, we lost you.
Yes, I think got disconnected.
Rasikananda Prabhu, you are there, or Jivananda Prabhu? Okay. Quick announcements before Maharaj comes back. April 21st, Wednesday, as we are hearing this Ram Katha, actual day of Ram Navami. So please try to fast if you can. Then we have program, temple program, 7 to 9 with Abhishek, Kirtan, and
Maharaj
Arati.
is back.
Okay, Maharaj, go ahead.
You are on mute, Maharaj. Janananda Maharaj, you are on mute. Maharaj, can you unmute? Oh, let me see if I can unmute. Go ahead, Maharaj.
Can you hear?
Maharaj, please go ahead, Maharaj. Yes.
Can you hear?
Yes, you're
Yeah,
back.
Maharaj.
Welcome back.
One of my favorite stories in the Ramayana, a short one or two paragraphs. And this is a story of Sita Devi. After the Battle of Lanka was completed, and Ram sent Hanuman to the Ashok Grove to bring Sita Devi. So Hanuman very happily went there and Sita Devi and informed Sita that the battle had been won by Ram, and Ravana and his army were defeated and he was dead, etc. Of course, wonderful experience. And then Hanuman said to Sita, all these Rakshasas in this Ashok Grove who have been, tormenting you over this year, if you like, I can kill them right now. He was eager to kill them all. So Sita Devi replied, well, whatever I have suffered was due to my own past misdeeds. This is another lesson, which of course she doesn't have any, but we do. These Rakshasi women only acted as instruments in the hands of destiny. Now, this is another thing which comes up, how a devotee sees in all these pastimes, there's a higher purpose going on behind everything. Whether it's the kidnapping of Sita, the banishment of Ram, the insults, let's say the trials and tribulations that they went through, there's a higher purpose there. And this is always coming out. Lord Brahma would always be remarking these things. A great man never takes into account the offenses that are committed against him by another person. Indeed, he vows at all costs never to return evil with evil. And then she told an amazing story of a hunter. And this hunter was being chased by a tiger. He tried to escape. He jumped up into a big tree to escape the tiger and was hanging on the branch of this tree. He was surviving the tiger who was trying to eat him. And then above him, however, in the branch, there was a big bear. The bear was fast asleep. So the tiger then called to the bear, hey, wakey, wakey. Don't you see there's a hunter on your tree? He's a common enemy. Push him out of the tree so that I can eat him. The bear, however, replied, no, because this hunter is taking shelter of my home, I will not do anything to harm him. Actually, first of all, the hunter said to the tiger said to the hunter, push the bear out of the tree, and then I will leave you alone. Because the bear was sleeping, so he didn't know what's going on. So the tiger said to the hunter, push the bear out of the tree and I'll let you go. Then I'll eat the bear instead. So the hunter did. He pushed the bear out. But just as the bear was about to fall to the ground, the bear grabbed the last branch. He woke up and grabbed the branch and was hanging there next to the hunter. And oh God, the hunter was stuck now. And so then the tiger said to the bear, do you know what just happened? That hunter tried to push you out of the tree so that I could eat you. He said, now why don't you push the hunter down? So then the bear replied, no, because this hunter has taken shelter of my home, I will not do anything to harm him. To do so will be unrighteous. Saying this, the bear went back to sleep. The tiger, okay, I got it the wrong way around. Anyway, you get the idea. The bear would not push the hunter out because he was a resident in his tree. So Sita, although she had been tormented and tortured by these Rakshasas, she didn't feel any anger or harm towards them whatsoever. It's another big lesson to learn in life, isn't it? Hard one for all of us who are so conditioned. But we can learn so much from these pastimes, although philosophically there's not much direct statements, but we can learn so much from it. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sri Ramayan ki jai. Gaur Premanande.
Hari Hari, all glories to you, Maharaj, all glories to Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Great
Janananda
Ramayana.
Prabhu.
Maybe this year we'll see you again. I don't know if we'll be able to come to America this year. Maybe not. Let's see what Krishna arranges. We don't know yet.
We'll have another katha from you, Maharaj. I'll coordinate, so maybe in a month or
Cut us.
virtual katha.
Krishna Katha.
Yes.
Well, summing up soon is Nrsimhadeva's appearance day, and then we have Rath Yatra, some other festivals then will be coming, and finally Janmashtami, and Balaram's appearance day, Hare Krishna.
Hare
Srila
Krishna.
Prabhupada ki jai. Haribol, everyone. Hare Krishna. Haribol, Dira. Nice to
Haribol.
see you, Dira.
Hare Krishna.
Good,
Maharaj.
Hare
Dhanyavad.
Krishna. Haribol. Haribol, Singeshwar.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandavad Pranam. Please accept my humble obeisances.
Haribol.
Hope you are doing well and you are feeling well.
Yeah, we're getting better. But many of us here had a little COVID in the last month, but we're all getting better now. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Keep
Hare
safe.
Krishna, Maharaj,
so much.
Pranam.
Keep hearing.
Thank you.
People. Hare Krishna. Bless the Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Hey, Haribo Devaki.
Please
Hare-
take care of yourself. We need you for another 100 years.
Oh my goodness.
Sankirtan
100 years in the life of an ant.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for everything.
Thank you. Haribo goes to Prabhupada.
All this.
Radhe Radhe.
Jai.
Radhe Radhe. Hari Bol. Dhanyavad.
Haribo.